Afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all back. Congratulations on surviving annual reviews. So I'm going to try to rein it in on the intro just a little bit today. And I'll just say that Karyn Olivier is an artist whose work helps me remember my place in history and my place in the world. Her work includes sculpture, installation, and public art. And her public art work includes forthcoming projects in downtown Milwaukee, an important one that should be finished this year in Philadelphia, at a place where more than 5,000 African Americans were buried, recently discovered under a playground, I think, in Philadelphia. And then completed projects also in Philadelphia, and in Tampa, Florida, Newark Airport, in New Jersey, in Rome, Italy, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, Lexington, Kentucky, one here in New York at Central Park, actually a couple in New York, and Toronto, Canada, and Houston, Texas. Solo exhibitions. Karyn's work has been exhibited in solo shows at Museum of Contemporary Art Detroit, Tanya Bonakdar Gallery twice, the Delaware Contemporary in Delaware, the ICA in Philadelphia at UPenn, and the Mattress Factory in Pittsburgh, and Project Row Houses in Houston, Texas. Group exhibitions include several biennials: the Whitney Biennial in 2024, the Gwangju Biennial, Busan Biennial, the World Festival of Black Arts and Culture in Dakar, Senegal, La Trienal at El Museo del Barrio in Harlem, the Malta Biennial, and Prospect.6 Triennial in New Orleans, also Documenta in Kassel, Germany, ICA Watershed in Boston, the Parish Art Museum in Watermill on Long Island, Ronald Feldman Gallery in Soho, New York City, Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art, the Studio Museum in Harlem, Momenta Art, Greater New York at PS1, the Contemporary Art Museum Houston, Socrates Sculpture Park, and the Museum of Fine Arts Houston.
I'm old.
We have that in common. And work has received a lot of support. Support from Anonymous Was a Woman, Pew Center for Arts and Heritage, the American Academy in Rome, that's the Rome Prize, the Harpo Foundation, the Pollock Krasner Foundation, New York Foundation for the Arts, Joan Mitchell Foundation. This is like...
Because I don't sell the work, no one buys it.
The Guggenheim, the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation, Art Matters, Creative Capital, the Lewis Comfort Tiffany Foundation, and others. Her work has been reviewed and discussed in the New York Times, the Boston Globe, the New Yorker, Bomb, Hyperallergic, the Washington Post, Art Forum, the Art Newspaper, the Philly Inquirer, Brooklyn Rail, Public Art Review, and Freeze. He's done residencies at Casa Wabi in Oaxaca, the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Marie Walsh Sharp Foundation, the core program at MFA Houston, and Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. She is a full professor at the Tyler School of Art and Architecture at Temple University in Philadelphia. Previously, she was... Right. Yeah. Some of us are thinking about obeying in advance, which is to be avoided. But anyway. And also University of Houston. She received a bachelor's in arts, a BA in psychology from Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, and an MFA in ceramics from Cranbrook. Please join me in welcoming the one and only Karyn Olivier.
Well, this is exciting. I'm so nervous. I'm like, oh my God, art students and grad art students. I'm on the train like, no, I had this work, no, take it out. That one's dumb. I was a hot mess on the train. So we'll see what happens. So we'll turn off the light. Make it dim. Okay. Ooh, this thing is aggressive. Okay. Okay, so do you, oh, I was wondering if I could sit. Is that dumb?
Yeah.
It's gonna be around an hour. It's okay if you fall asleep. Just whoever's next to, just knock if they're snoring, because that could be disruptive. The sleeping isn't disruptive, but the snoring may be. Oh. Oh my God, there's things here. Okay, so this is an image of MOVE. MOVE was a Black liberation group founded in West Philly in 1972, and they were subject to periodic police confrontations and violence stirred by the anarcho-primitivist lifestyle. Here you can see, what's this? Okay.
You should be able to.
Okay, perfect. So confrontations continue growing. I mean, it was happening over years, but this confrontation continued to grow. And here you can see one of the members barricading and securing the compound. So on May 12, 1985, which was Mother's Day that year, the police issued eviction and arrest warrants to MOVE and instructed the residents in the neighborhood to vacate their homes until the following evening. So a standoff ensued and the police helicopter dropped a bomb on the MOVE compound. Then the famous words were issued by the first Black mayor of Philadelphia to let the fire burn. 11 MOVE members were murdered, including 5 children. Here you can see the devastation. So this is a photograph of Anna Jarvis, who was a West Virginia native who moved to Philadelphia. And in 1907, she led a campaign to make Mother's Day a national holiday. And she was thinking of mothers in particular, but also whoever stands in as a mother. And the carnation became recognized as the flower for that holiday, partly because it was her mother's favorite flower. But I think about how it exists in other contexts. In Jamaica, it's a funerary flower. Most people probably remember it as a corsage, cheesy high school prom thing. So I was thinking like it's a flower that kind of everyone has some sort of relationship to. So for my exhibition at the ICA in Philadelphia, which was in January 2022, literally like 6 weeks before the global lockdown, I decided to have these carnation pins be offered to the museum goers instead of the little pins that said the ICA on it. And I wanted to acknowledge MOVE, which was really like about 2 miles away from the school, from the museum. And I was thinking about Mother's Day, which was like the day before the horror that transpired in the city, kind of like the day before, Black pain was on display. And I was thinking about MOVE, and I was thinking about this piece in relationship to the Stumbling Stone Holocaust memorials, where bronze plaques are placed in front of the homes of those victimized and killed during the Nazi regime. And to me, it's one of the most moving memorials. And I was thinking about how I love the experience of it, where we know that in a way, it's the most decentralized memorial in Europe, with the fact that its scale shifts. I was interested in too what it would mean for these corsages, that through kind of this collective act of wearing or holding the carnation, we form this temporary physical community in the museum. Like, what would it mean for a museum to be a space for community? And then I was thinking about how then you leave the museum and you kind of disperse throughout the city. And I wanted to create this monument. I think in a way it's thinking about how we can have a different relationship to monuments and memorials. Like, what does it mean for it to be intimate and mobile? The fact that it's portable and it can move. Like, in a way, I'm trying to invert monuments' presumed scale and fixity. So this is a project in 2015. I think it was the first public art project on this scale that happened after the Cristo orange flags, which now there's like a virtual thing that people are doing right now, that's up right now. So this was organized by Creative Time in Central Park. And I decided, felt really daunting, like, what can I do here in a place doesn't need art? So I decided to just focus on the site. And I was thinking maybe if I do that, I could reveal like what existed at that location, perhaps allowing for reflection of what stands there today. So I decided to create this 3-flip lenticular billboard. And I was thinking about how those lenticulars are I always thought about them as cheesy, like seeing the naked ladies' clothes come on, things like that. So it's like, how could I make it like a serious thing? So it seemed to make sense for this project. And I was reading about the Wisconsin glacier that traveled through what is now New York City 20,000 years ago. And it created valleys, moved boulders, formed rock outcroppings. It carried debris that was eternally stranded in new locations when the ice sheet melted. And I was interested in this physical evidence, this geological diaspora that can be found throughout Central Park. It's both, everywhere in plain sight, but we don't see it because we don't know it's there or we don't have an awareness of it. I was also interested in a more recent history of Seneca Village and the fact that there's very little evidence left of this once vibrant community. This settlement was mostly freed African-American residents in the 1800s. And when the decision was made to build Central Park, they were pretty much displaced and scattered wholesale throughout the city. Few traces of their tendency are left in the bucolic park. So the billboard depicted an image of the glacier, but also the pottery shard that was found on the site of the village. And I saw this kind of literal and metaphoric connection between the subtle residual artifacts of Seneca Village, but also the glacier. And the third image was a photograph of directly behind the billboard, so the actual landscape. So when the viewer kind of moves from one end of the billboard to the other, the glacier seemed to morph into another time period. It was as if the park goers' movements were controlling time or their understanding of it. So the glacier mutated into a shard from a ceramic vessel, this domestic object made from clay dug from the same earth the glacier traversed before it too vanished. This I took from the New York Times. They wrote a bad review about my piece, but whatevs. I take the picture, uncredited. Depending on the viewer's vantage point, multiple iterations of the three images could be seen. At moments, each image is distinct. And other times they reveal themselves as fragments. And I wanted the expansiveness of the glacier to be felt in contrast to the scale of a ceramic plate fragment. Like I hoped to somehow equate the massiveness and larger than life physicality of a glacier with the smallness and the intimacy of a domestic object, a plate. What would it mean to position these two opposing scales and physicalities into the same image? At varying times, the images did this strange thing where they overlapped and became compressed. And I started thinking of it as like, in a sense, it's like the compression of, thousands of years of time into a single image. So this is I'm going to share I did two projects at Documenta, but I'm going to show only one. So this is, I was invited by this Trinidad and Tobago collective. I'm from Trinidad and I left when I was one, but we'll talk about that later. And I decided, so I was invited to something. And so I spent a week there and I just want to do a small little gesture. And I was thinking about that, the star-studded Documenta from at that time, 40 years prior, where Joseph Beuys, basically, he planted the 7,000 oaks, which you guys are probably familiar with. But I think about how it forever changed and marked the landscape. Like Castle didn't look like that. Now that there's 7,000 trees, it's a completely different landscape. So I was thinking about that. And I was also thinking about Klaus Oldenburg had died a couple months prior. So this is a photograph of his contribution to the exhibition. His sculpture is titled Pickaxe. And this is a photograph I took in Trinidad, probably like 2008, so the quality isn't very good. But it's one of my favorite places in Trinidad, Brazo Seco, where the river, Paria River, meets the sea. So I was thinking, I want to do something with these two things. So I created a poster, and this is the title, parentheses, Outcast, Pickaxe by Klaus Oldenburg at Fulda River Castle, semicolon, Driftwood at the edge of Paria River, Brazo Seco. And there's a quote that's part of this from Jeanette Winterson. There is always a city, there is always a civilization, there is always a barbarian with a pickaxe. Sometimes you're the city, sometimes you're the civilization. But to become that city, that civilization, you once took a pickaxe and destroyed what you hated. And what you hated is what you did not understand. And for me, it was important for the poster to exist in the two locations in Kassel, Germany, but also in Trinidad, to kind of deal with these two very, very disparate locales. And I was thinking about that year's Documenta, and there's talk about there'll never be another Documenta. It was the first Documenta filled with collectives, mostly brown and Black folks. And I started to wonder what its legacy will be after the kind of relentless controversy coverage over the anti-Semitic allegations. And so this poster was repasted on the exterior of Truffle House, which was this great multi-purpose space. It was like a radio station, performance venue. So that's in Castle. And in Trinidad, it's at the place called Grandison Lab, which is a cultural and artistic center in Port of Spain in the main city. And each week, what was great about this, my piece was up for a week, and each week a new poster was repasted, and I really enjoyed the temporal nature of it, and how it kept changing. It almost like reflect the context changed where that site was and kept changing its meaning and what was around, how you understood what was surrounding it. So in 2010, maybe it was, I was invited to be part of this contemporary Caribbean art exhibition at Real Art Ways. And I decided I didn't want to do anything in the museum. You know, in my research, I found out that it was the 4th largest Caribbean community in North America. So I was thinking about, you know, my relationship to Trinidad. You know, I was born there. I left when I was young. I spent every summer there. So I kind of never questioned my West Indian heritage. You know, I still have a deep love for soca, pan. I go back to Carnival every year and I work with a band. But I started to, you know, think of, you know, other signifiers of culture, you know, books, literature. And I was realizing how maybe my education was decidedly American. I was thinking about how few Caribbean titles I'd read as an adult. You know, in college, I took one Caribbean literature class, and really, there's only 2 students in the class, me and my twin, by the way. How crazy is that? But anyway, so I was thinking, you know, when was the last time, you know, I read a poetry of Derek Walcott or reread Crick Crack Monkey or picked up a book by Edris Danticat. You know, I started to like, felt it really like, because it's the thing where you're an immigrant, and though I'm from Trinidad, it's a thing where, yes, I'm American, but when I'm there, I have to say it's the place where I feel the most who I am. But it's a weird thing because I'm not. When I'm there, they call me a Yankee, even though they all love me and I have family there and I go all the time. So it's a funny place to be. So I feel like in a way, what I decided to do was really for me. So I decided to create a Caribbean, a library as a remedy. And I was thinking, what would it mean for me to put a functioning library of exclusively Caribbean titles into a West Indian grocer? And the books were organized by category and region. You know, they range on the shelves alongside the products. So that wall on the left is all jerk sauces. So Jamaican titles were there. Political titles were by the hot pepper sauces. Only made sense. You know, and it's a trust library. You know, there was no library card needed. You know, there was actually no specific date of return. You know, you were just trusted to return them when I felt like when you kind of consume the, you know, the imperishable produce of our Caribbean heritage. And I hope to kind of have people slow down and kind of, you know, relish the sight, smells, and the language, our history, our words, our creativity in this other way, in this site. You know, I was also thinking about, you know, what does it mean for disparate economies to be happening in the same space? You know, so lending and borrowing is happening in the same place where capitalism and monetary exchanges are happening. I was thinking too about blind spots. There were a lot of empty shelves in this space. So what does it mean for me to insert something else into that empty space? No one would know the reason why I put Trinidadian titles by this fruit, but and this is kind of a tough year for me because the first year my mom and I usually make our Trinidad black cakes. So the beginning of December, you take this dried fruit and you put port wine and rum and all this stuff in it. And this is the first year I had to kind of do it myself because my mom is not well. So this is like my personal story why I put the Trinidad tiles by this fruit. This was to be funny, like authors from the smaller islands by the beans. I'm sorry. My personal joke. Okay, Guyanese titles by some Guyanese products. Children's books were by the cookies and biscuits. These are Haitian tiles were in the front with the Haitian sodas. And I took a while figuring out where should I put like the cultural books, like books on like the biography of Bob Marley or like the history of Carnival. And I decided to place it among these beverages. Like some of them are these ancient medicinal tonics, but also there are these beverages that have, you know, offensive names like Bedouin Bully that comes from Jamaica. My people, my other people, I have family there. I mean, pretty misogynistic country still. But it seemed to me to be the right place to have this complex, complicated site. Someone stole that book, Mocha Jumbies, and never came back, which I understand. It's an amazing coffee table book. And then I was having fun with seeing things like, I feel like if I wasn't an artist, or if I had talent, I barely have talent as an artist, I have to say. But anyway, I wish I could be a poet. So I was like, oh my God, this is like poetry, like skin folk, hard dough, like making my own little poetry from this. But this is how it functioned, it's, and I was thinking about how, it wasn't installed in Crown Heights, my Caribbean neighborhood where I grew up. It's another neighborhood, so it wasn't mine. So it was left for them to do as they wanted to with it, which I enjoyed. And it was up for about a year and a half, and the store kind of had problems. So then they ended up moving the books to a community center nearby. And then I did the project 5 years later in Toronto, which is a really huge Caribbean community. And I had to update the books. I had more Jamaican titles to adapt to the demographics. Okay, so I have a big interest, which might seem weird, in these 16th century talking statues of Rome. I found out about them before I went to Rome and did the Rome Prize. And it was weird. A friend just mentioned them to me in passing, and I literally it was like a revelation. So you had these anonymous messages were attached to a group of these 6 statues. And this is the original one called Pasquino. And the messages were left by the public, reinventing these statues as sites for protests, sites for political dissent. They were a site for critique and commentary on the religious and political authorities at the time. The effigies became really the spokespeople of Rome. And at times the responses were happening between statues. And I was so interested in this idea that these multiple histories and shifting authors, what did that mean? And it did this thing where in my head, like the statue it was active, it was mutable, it was contemporary. I always tell my students, I don't care if we're looking at a statue from 400 years ago, it's always contemporary. It's always in relation to the context of now. So in 2016, there was a citywide exhibition that you were part of, and your piece was the best in this. I should be showing that if I knew you were here. Caitlin, best piece. But anyway, so it was this monument lab and mural arts, and they charged the artists with like what is an appropriate monument for the city of Philadelphia, and they asked us to create these prototypes. And I was intrigued by these 2 monuments in a park that's a couple blocks away from my home. So this is a monument dedicated to Francis Daniel Pistorius. He was a German settler to the neighborhood Germantown. It used to be a German stronghold. And in my research, I found out that he led the first Quaker protest against slavery in 1688, so almost 20 years before it was abolished. And I was thinking about and when that happened, he was like, how are Quakers, he called this to the Quakers, like, how can we say we're pacifists? How can we say that we love each other and have slaves? So he really kind of did a thing. But I found out that during World War I and II, this statue, this monument was boxed over. The thought was that the look and the feel was too dramatic. So the other monument, this is centrally located in the park. This is the Battle of Germantown Memorial. And it commemorates an American Revolutionary War battle led by George Washington. It was actually the only Revolutionary War battle that happened in Philadelphia. I was interested in the fact that it honors a failed battle, like we lost that, but it speaks to, power, access, privilege, like who gets to have a monument, who is deemed worthy. So it's interesting that this immigrant, Pistorius, who's fighting for the freedom of Blacks, of the enslaved in this country, but wasn't considered American enough to continually honor. And then thinking of Washington, who was fighting for America's freedom from British rule while owning slaves, and thinking about the complexity and the paradox of these kind of disparate histories that make up America. So I wanted to kind of use that in my intervention. So I decided to shroud the Battle of Germantown Memorial in this mirrored surface. I first thought I was just going to box it up, and I realized I needed to do another like remix. The neighborhood is now predominantly African-American. But I wanted to point to this monument that we may not see that history you could see out of your corner of your eye right over there. And I hope the physical concealment with this reflective surface would allow the monument, kind of in a way that the 16th century statues did, to feel expansive and accessible and maybe less intimidating than their kind of monumental physical weight of their materiality allow. And I was interested too in invisibility. The way I entered the park, I would always be like, oh my God, it's gone. I literally, for like 3 months, was like, my heart like jumped. Crazy. So I was thinking about, so depending on where you entered, it disappeared. And I was thinking how I wanted it to be in the direct conversation with the Confederate monument debate that was, I think it's still pretty alive, but in that moment was kind of a hot moment. And this piece was installed in 2017. It was about literally a week before that neo-Nazi white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, where that people were run down. But it's interesting, like, what does invisibility reveal, or like, what does invisibility bring to the fore? Like, or what does it challenge? You know, what does it suggest about notions of, you know, access and privilege? And then I started to think about, if I'm like kind of way spotlighting what was hidden now, like, how does that shift the legacy and the future of the status quo? You know, and it's a neighborhood park, you know, so I was thinking, you know, these monolithic, imposing, impenetrable sculptures, and how like most park owners probably take them in kind of like from a physical and metaphoric distance, like that has to do with someone else's history. Or the fact that if you see it over and over again, you don't see it anymore. So it's thinking like maybe the familiar I can make like strange or uncanny. You know, in the work, I'm often trying to kind of engage with multiple histories to reveal really the fragmentary nature in which we learn about the past, and really the impossibility of a universal or objective history. You know, I'm hoping to point to the fact that, you know, historical narratives are conflicting. You know, our present is grounded in these innumerable histories and continue to shift as, you know, new knowledge is unearthed. I just started adding this photograph in. It's like horrifying. To me, like the coldness calls to mind like fascist monuments and architecture. And for me, I felt like it's kind of maybe useful to ponder how just the change of the season from summer to late fall in the gray sky kind of drastically changed the tenor and the feel and the reading of the monument, and how like context really affects things. You know, but I was also thinking, you know, how exciting to try to make a piece that's reimagining a monument that you see the world in front, behind, above, below you, directed in front of you. So in a way, disrupting that verticality we assume with monuments, we're always kind of looking up to them, kind of ridding that singular perspective. So I'm at an event, so there's all this programming around the Monument Lab, and I'm at an event where they invited all these poets to read poems. And then all of a sudden someone's reading a poem about my work. I'm like, what? The best thing about this is the highlight of my career has already happened. So Tripita Mason, who was the poet laureate in Philadelphia a couple of years ago, also a historian, also lives in Germantown, not far from me, wrote this poem. So we'll play that now.
Monuments to Brown Boys. The artist installed the mirror over the monument, and the people have come to gawk. Rubberneckers wonder what was there before, and you have come too, laying in the cut, statue still for seconds, your reflection edging off a 20-foot-high bronze looking glass. You are an alluring hunk of stone beguiling me. Yes, you, brown boy, rough cut, monolith. I see you. You are a low-slung jean-wearing, grandmother greeting pillar, an obelisk marking the entrance of your hood. You need to be somebody's memorial, not only when you laid out and lowered in the dirt, your pillow a marble headrest of past tense, he was, he once, he lived. No, you are now and present, alive and in color, and you need to be somebody's walking shrine, somebody's testament, somebody's tribute in this city. You have to be carved, stretched, and erect, a column to buttress boogeymen, the phantoms they say you imagine, the specters and goblins who told bullets and policies and laws that encase you. You need to be somebody's memento. Look how you beaming off that seeing glass. I'm catching your shine. Look at that swagger you carrying, hoodie wearing, fresh fade having, full teeth grinning. You need to be somebody's something to fight for, somebody's celebration, somebody's stone turned monument, carved and smooth, our masterpiece in this city.
I used to try to read it and I would be sobbing and talk. So she's like, Karyn, I just recorded it. Just take it. Thank goodness. So this is a 1934 New Deal era fresco by Anne Weisel Hanlon. And at the time, actually, was the largest fresco made by a woman. But it's been at the center of controversy and debate at the University of Kentucky for many years. viewed through contemporary eyes, I mean, it sanitizes history. It kind of glazes over the brutality of slavery. It presents a caricature portrayal of Native Americans. Here, there's only one Native American in this mural, and it's reflecting a particular story where this woman was murdered, but it's the only representations. The proximity, I always think about the proximity of this man with this gunman with this couple trying to have a peaceful respite. Musicians playing for the white elite. This boy denied access to the performance venue, but sneaking a look up in the tree. So in 2015, the university's president decided to cloak the mural for a couple of years to have the campus community decide, what do we do? Amidst all the protests that were happening by both students and people outside of. And the decision was to do a call for an artist to do something, to be in conversation with it. Something that would kind of maybe jumpstart a corrective or be some sort of healing to the pain that the contested mural was causing. So I was selected, and I was intrigued by the vestibule of Memorial Hall, which is right outside the lobby that has the fresco. And I kept looking, I was like, they didn't want me to do anything to the ceiling. I said, but I have to do something up there, this dome ceiling. And I was intrigued by it, 16 feet diameter, I think about 25 feet off the ground from the floor. And it just raised interesting questions for me, like why was the space designed this way? Like, what does it mean to create a dome ceiling, dome vestibule in an academic building? Domes go back to prehistory, Byzantine, Islamic architecture. Like, what symbolism does it possibly have in a building of higher education? And I guess my hope was for the recognition of these kind of beginning questions, to question, like, what does it mean for this? Why do we inhabit, and why are these spaces built the way we do, and how do we inhabit them? So I decided to gild the dome ceiling and inserted painting reproductions of all the brown and black figures from the fresco. So I created copies of each figure, scaling them up proportionally to fit comfortably in the dome ceiling. I think at the heart of my gesture was the act of kind of liberating these beings, these figures, from whiteness. What possible reclamation and agency could be gained without the surrounding whiteness that they were previously resigned to. So in a way, like the subjugated, those deemed lowly were in a sense elevated to the divine. And of course, gold leaf makes reference to, Renaissance and Byzantine churches and kind of elevating them to saints. But I was also thinking about celestial beings and thinking of them as constellations and stars. My hope was for these figures on the ceiling to reinforce the notion of rebirth, or the possibility of, spiritually, but also thinking in terms of, like, more importantly, the viewer's reinvestigation, interrogation, and reckoning with America's complex histories. The representation of these historic figures, too, could point to some sort of futurity of Blackness. So here you can see in the fresco, the horse carriage drivers, taking a little rest. So I kept thinking, where am I going to position him in the ceiling? So in my reinterpretation, I had this kind of dreamlike scene where this surreal-like scene where it's kind of pointing to maybe directly the violence of the times as the resting driver descends in close proximity to the sickle of the field hand, most likely an enslaved man working the land. I kept referring to these folks as the witnesses, to both the literal and metaphoric witnesses of the atrocities and oppression of the times. And then I thought, so it was good. And I was like, I feel like I need something. So I turned to Frederick Douglass and I took a quote from his very famous address. What to the slave is the 4th of July. So around the base of the dome is a quote, "There's not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him." So I was conscious of the building being, Memorial Hall honoring Kentuckians who died in World War I. So I decided in these medallions to recognize 4 maybe under-recognized Kentuckians. So this is a representation of Georgia Powers, who was the first African-American to serve the Kentucky Senate. She sponsored bills prohibiting employment discrimination, sex and age discrimination. This represents Chief Redbird, a Cherokee who lived among the white settlers in Clay County until he was murdered by 2 Tennessee men. The 2 white men were never tried in court. Peter Durrett, a former slave, and preacher who founded First African Baptist Church in Lexington, Kentucky in 1790. At the time of his death, it was like one of the largest congregations in the town. And of course, I couldn't find any representations of Durrett in any archives. So I decided to portray him as a silhouetted head. And, this was a popular way of making portraits before maybe the common use of photography. But in a sense, I was, kind of forced to show him as almost this anonymous figure. And it speaks to, who at the time was worthy of being painted, recorded, documented, preserved, like who gets to be in the archive. This is representing Charlotte Dupuy, who was an enslaved African-American woman who filed a freedom suit in 1829 against her master, Henry Clay, who at the time was the country's Secretary of State. The case went to court 17 years before Dred Scott filed his more famous legal challenge to slavery. So after Clay's tenure in the White House, she refused to return to his home and was jailed. So, the piece is titled Witness, and I was thinking I needed a piece that could be both like a noun and a verb, or it was important for it to kind of serve the particulars of the space, an academic institution where it had to be layered enough for repeat viewings. I was thinking like, it was important for it to activate history, to keep it alive and rooted in the present tense. I wanted it to be useful and possibly a teaching tool, where, art history, religion, economics, history, African-American studies. I was thinking that it could be used by those departments potentially. So yes, I'm elevating the anonymous figures to the divine, but I was also thinking about gold. Like, what does it mean for me to use gold, where gold could be a literal reminder of the time when Black folks were considered just, commodity, I was also thinking too of, gold that was traded, but also stolen in northern sub-Saharan Africa during the Roman Empire. So on June 5th, 2020, in the wake of the demands for racial justice prompted by the murder of George Floyd, the university's president announced his decision to remove the O'Hanlon mural. And to me, it felt like a quick fix to quell the fury, the Black fury that was raging between Lexington and to Louisville. And the decision to remove the O'Hanlon mural also rendered my piece Witness, blind and mute. It couldn't exist without the past it sought to confront. And it really felt kind of ironic and kind of, when I got past the being so upset, like the idea that's like sad, the decision to kind of censor the work, it kind of in one fell swoop, it censored my installation. So instead of kind of embracing the polemics of the work of these two works, what these two works engendered, work by a white woman in 1934 and a Black woman today, it felt like a seemingly good deed of political correctness was offered up to the community when there was actual real work that the students were demanding, the faculty was demanding, like, why are there so few Black faculty? Why is there so much food insecurity? Why choose this thing, which is the least of our problems? So I was upset. So then I wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post that was accepted. That's why I'm glad I have an undergrad degree from a non-art school. I learned how to write. So I wrote this op-ed, and in it I wrote, Witness was not created to magically dispel or absolve the University of Kentucky from embedded institutional white supremacy and oppression. When I finished the piece, I assumed that would be when the university's real work would begin. I thought there'd be programming, seminars, something, a site where the community could really wrestle with the very problematic and paradoxical, simultaneous and fragmented histories that we're forced to deal with. So it's a bit heartbreaking. Now it's covered over. I think they're trying now to physically move it. It's going to cost millions of dollars. And there's another lawsuit going on where Rhonda Berry's wife's aunt made the piece. So it's like it's on government land, so they can't just take it down. So it's held up in a mess right now. So when I was at the American Academy in Rome for the year, I was invited to do a project with this American artist who's been living there for a long time. He started Black History Month Florence, and he invited me to do a project at Le Murate, which is this incredible art institution. So I did 6 site-specific installations. I'm only going to show one, but the site was a former 14th century Florentine convent for cloistered nuns. Le Murate literally means walled up, walled in. But by the late 19th century, it became a prison. And then in 1985, it was converted to an art and cultural space. So I decided to create, it was the only piece that's almost happened instant. Like I spent like maybe 10 minutes in the space and I thought of the idea. I'm never that lucky. I make 3 works a year, but anyway. So I created an audio installation in the former jail cells dedicated to isolating prisons. This is like solitary confinement. And the recording was an Italian translation of Dr. Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail from 1963. And I hired a local activist, Antonella Bundi, who was a first-generation Florentine from Sierra Leone. And the 53-minute recording kind of was haunting through the space. And it was important for me to have someone who was a recent immigrant, thinking how he was speaking often in that letter about being from America, but feeling foreign. And I feel at that time in Italy, I mean, it's even worse now, the rhetoric against immigrants. So it was important for me to have this first generation, but also women to kind of call back the time when it was for the nuns. You know, so in this letter, he makes reference to the Roman Empire. It's a main sense to do this in Italy. He also speaks about, you know, the role of religion and religious belief and what role it should play, literally in fighting racial justice. I'm going to play a little, I did a little short video documenting the installation. I should turn this down because I know it's going to be a little loud. And I had a long intro. Let me see if I can.
Per onestà devo confessare 2 cose a voi, miei fratelli cristiani ed ebrei. In primo luogo, devo confessare che negli ultimi anni i bianchi di opinioni moderate mi hanno dato una grave delusione. Starei quasi per arrivare alla spiacevole conclusione che nel cammino dei neri verso la libertà l'ostacolo maggiore non è l'aderente al White Citizens Council o l'affiliato del Ku Klux Klan, bensì il bianco moderato che ha a cuore l'ordine più della giustizia, che preferisce la pace negativa, ossia l'assenza di tensioni, a una pace positiva, ossia la presenza della giustizia, che dice sempre: sono d'accordo con voi per quanto riguarda gli obiettivi che vi prefiggete, ma non posso essere d'accordo con i vostri metodi di azione diretta, che crede nel suo paternalismo di poter essere lui a determinare le scadenze della libertà di un altro, che vive secondo un concetto mitico del tempo e continua a consigliare ai neri di attendere un momento più propizio. La scarsa comprensione da parte di persone ben disposte è ben più frustrante dell'assoluta incomprensione mostrata da chi è mal disposto. L'accettazione tiepida sconcerta assai più del rifiuto secco. Prima di concludere, mi sento in dovere di citare ancora un punto della vostra dichiarazione che ha suscitato in me un profondo turbamento. Il caloroso elogio che rivolgete alla polizia di Birmingham per aver mantenuto l'ordine e impedito atti di violenza. Dubito che la vostra lode sarebbe stata altrettanto calorosa se aveste visto i cani della polizia affondare i denti nella carne di neri disarmati e non violenti. Dubito che avreste avuto tanta fretta nell'elogiare i poliziotti se aveste potuto osservare il modo sgradevole e disumano in cui trattano i neri qui nella prigione cittadina. Se li aveste visti mentre prendevano a spintoni e insultavano anziane, donne e ragazze nere. Se li aveste visti prendere a schiaffi e a calci neri vecchi e giovani. Se li aveste visti, come è accaduto in 2 occasioni, mentre si rifiutavano di darci da mangiare perché volevamo cantare insieme la preghiera di ringraziamento per il nostro cibo. Nell'elogio della polizia di Birmingham non posso unirmi a voi.
Line it up a little. Airports. I couldn't believe it. I got a commission at an airport. I'm like, what? I told my brother, I'm going to do something about like the riots. He's like, you will not get the commission if you do it political. Keep it lighter. Okay, so Newark Airport, new terminal, you should fly out of it. It's amazing. You don't have to take anything off. Things just go through like the MRI machine. It's great. So my piece is called Approach. It was first airborne and they're like, COVID, new title. Okay, Approach. So I created these 2 52-foot tall suspended sculptures that fill the bays in the new terminal. And I was with the art, I was trying to capture the kind of the bus tapestry of New Jersey, you know, the skylines, the industry, the neighborhoods, the landmarks, the beauty, all of that. So in a way, slices of land and sky are suspended in these 2 helix-like structures. One depicts daytime and the other night. This one is a daytime image, daytime sculpture. And the hope is to kind of, again, surprise visitors and invoke an immediate sense of place. Each ring is double-sided and presents two distinct views. When you physically looking up at it, you're seeing a bird's eye view. When you're looking down into the sculpture, you're seeing a skyward view. So this inversion for me kind of echoes the temporary disorientation and strangeness of travel when you're traveling through different time zones and arriving at different places with new perceptions. This is a view if you're standing directly under it. Like you're in baggage claim waiting for your bags, and if you stand under it, this is what you see. And I was thinking, those people have deboarded and come down. If you're sitting at the window looking out, you would have seen some of these views as you're descending. So now when you're down there waiting for your bags, you're looking up and seeing a view that you would have seen a little while ago. But instead of looking down, you're looking up to see that. So this inversion I was trying to play around with. It's exciting for many reasons. I mean, I was able to go into the control tower, hanging out someone's fancy penthouse apartment in downtown New York. It was pretty amazing to have it. I took like 5,000 photographs that had to be reduced down to like 68, I think it was. I got a little seasick, air sick in the helicopter. He's like, stop. I was like, I need the city hall. And he's going in circles of like, I can't, I'm gonna vomit. But anyway, it was fun though. It was cool other than the vomit. So, I'm hoping the sculpture could like spotlight what's already been there. Because I was thinking I wanted to function for visitors who come one time, but also people, that's your airport, that's your terminal. I'm hoping I could kind of like give you things so that in a way, these fragments and these abstractions allowing for like this partial view. Like here you're seeing like the New Jersey shore, the tarmac of the terminal, and on the left, the Jersey Turnpike. And I'm thinking how a viewer could fill in the rest. You don't need to see the whole image. So here's a view of the entire thing. I like that when you approach it, it does a weird thing where sometimes it feels really massively heavy, and other times it becomes these lines, like drawn lines in space. And I liked how it kind of kept changing depending on your perspective. This is a little video I did when I was in the elevator. I'm like, cool. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to make a piece that could be good for just one viewing. Like I'm always relying on works that are public where someone will see it again. So it'll give you something else. Well, this was like a one-time thing. And I was like, I don't think I can do it. But somehow, no, not again. Okay. Then, okay, near the ceiling, I installed a mirror. I like mirrors. But I like the idea, like when you look down, you would see the sky view, but now with the mirror, in a way, you're returning the sky to the sky. And then you can see like the person upside down in it. So this is the second one. So this is sunset to nighttime. And I was thinking how, nighttime is a different kind of feeling at an airport. So I wanted the feeling of it to be different. This is me standing under it during construction. This is what it looks like standing directly under it. I was thinking like how like we each bring our own unique perspectives to every situation, but I love how this is physical and kind of metaphoric. Endless pictures. I love this one. There's a father who was like, we have to go. And this kid was like, no, look, as a kid, made me think at least children will appreciate this piece. Like, I like that it captured, like, for me, the idea of like the wonder and joy and like the discovery that I still get excited when I'm flying. Okay. So this piece is fortified. It's a 15 by 30-foot wall that's literally becomes part of the architecture. Instead of, it's an interesting idea of this massive wall that feels impenetrable. This installation was at the ICA. I was thinking about how walls have disparate functions. They can act as borders, shelter, they protect some, keep others out. The signifiers of power. So in here, instead of mortar, what's holding the bricks together is used clothing, worn clothing. Upon closer observation, you realize this wall that felt solid, now you see the cracks. This solid impasse is now mutable and malleable. There's an instability to it now. I was thinking about this, that almost like the too muchness of it, imagining, hundreds of bodies that previously wore these clothings, like the anonymous, but then you have this kind of up close intimacy of, this infants, cute little footsies. So when you turn around, the experience is very different. It feels like a tsunami of clothing. I started to think about this wall as, a monument or a memorial, like a monument to human costs. I always think about a brick it's a building block, but it's also could be a weapon. It could also be, I think about like, that's how empires can be can be dismantled. We're having a moment now that we are gonna have to do the work. So this piece, I like that it's beautiful, but to me, it holds so much of like emotion for me, but also like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? Don't worry, guys, we have maybe only 4 more works. We're at the home stretch, I think. I hope. I don't know why I put this in. I love this piece and nobody loves it. I think that's why I'm putting it in. Whatever. It's called Falsehood Cape. So I unseamed, I dissected a hoodie, and I made a coat rack out of a really old coal shovel handle. And I was thinking about, David Hammond, like you can't, like it's adjacent to his hood piece, but I was also thinking about Elio Tesica, who I love, his parangoles, the idea of like you could dance, those capes where people could dance and perform in. I was thinking about them as cloaks, as flags, as banners, as tents, so I hoped, this disassembled shape could perhaps speak about transformation or like an opening or a possibility. And I'm showing this because it's like the first clothing piece I did. I had just finished the core program, or I was doing the core program right after grad school, and I had no money, and I got asked to do a project at Soap Factory. And I was like, well, I'm living in Houston, so this piece is called Winter Home to Dry. I could give my winter clothes for this piece. So and this piece was in Prospect in New Orleans, and now it's up in Philadelphia in a small group show. So I think this piece for me still holds up. It's a direct reference to childhood memories. Like in Trinidad, somehow we hand wash clothes, and we did laundry every day and hanging up that clothing with my grandmother in our backyard. The apartment in Brooklyn, that was also my job. I'd hang the clothes. So I was thinking about these two kind of pivotal moments in my childhood. I have such memories of conversations with my mother hanging clothes and my grandmother. So I piled all of my winter clothes on the middle of this line. It's about 80 feet long. And I was didn't expect this kind of weighty weightlessness thing to happen. There's a melancholy to it. It's, in a way, the clothes is almost hanging like surrogates for a body. But I also wanted to be stupid and absurd. Winter clothes is not the clothes you'd be hanging on a clothesline because it'd be too cold to, you get where I'm going. So I was hoping there'd be kind of some humor in this piece. I'm showing this for the first time. This is a piece titled Powers of 10, in parentheses, Home Kit. And I had a weird day where I just watched that Charles and Ray Eames Powers of 10. I probably watched it 30 times over and over. It was amazing. I just was zoning out, and I was like, and it led to this piece. But so at the time I was at Artists in Residence at Revolutionary Recovery, which is a construction demolition recycling center in Philly. And it was pretty incredible to have access. You guys should apply for residencies here. It's incredible. You have access to like 500 tons of materials that are either going to end up recycled or in a landfill. And when I was during the residency, I was kind of equally devastated, but excited by the materials that were showing up. That there were poignant moments when you see all of a sudden a truck comes and it's unloading someone, and you realize someone has died, and this is their life. I think about the human desire to make home, to make shelter. Like we surround ourselves with things that have meaning, even if there is harm in other ways. So in this piece, it's 10 concentric. I was thinking about the 10 most common materials used in a home, in home construction, and organizing them in these concentric rings. So from the outside, it's plastic. So the plastic here are recycled resin pellets, then it's asphalt roofing, gypsum, which of course is for drywall, sawdust, fiberglass insulation, armored cable, that's that cable that's covering, that plastic's covering cable, wire, cement, carpet padding, glass, and flexible steel conduit. And it's positioned on the floor above this, on this like kind of movable dolly. So the aggregate of these materials in this kit could be read as kind of a portal into geological time and our current epoch. So each material was repurposed for the sculpture after extraction from the earth in other forms, so asphalt is coming from tar pits that are thousands of years in making, sawdust from a tree that say maybe was around for 50 years, or glass made from sand produced from erosion of a rock from say millions of years ago. So, so in a way, it's like, I'm trying to have almost like having this, again, another compression of, you make the same work over and over, a compression of all these years of time. I did this residency in Casa Wabe in Oaxaca, and this piece is called, in parentheses, dis, in parentheses, in parentheses, in place. And it's comprised of tinted sand with this transparent photo I took at this elementary school playground where I did a project, public art project with the kids. So the discarded chairs kind of serve a new function without the legs. They became like site for play for the kids. The chairs became this reconfigured or reimagined like canoe. And in a way, the dirt became, the ground became the sea. You know, in the work, I'm often thinking about like migration and portability and movement and displacement. I'm thinking about amplified absences. This piece is definitely a nod to one of my conflicted art heroes, Robert Smithson, and his mirror displacements and ideas of sight and on-site. At some point, I mean, all that work he was inserting into the land, and then he posed a question later on that when he made the non-site pieces, saying instead of putting a work of art, you know, onto the land, I'm going to bring it in. But there's so many problematics with that work that scream at us. So I'm still trying to reckon with all of that too. My role and what am I doing in terms of extraction and my human intervention and the consequences of my action. So this is usually the final work I'll show. But, so this sculpture's title, How Many Ways Can You Disappear? And it consists of fishing detritus I recovered from Antinicus Island, Maine. And my wife family has a house there, so it's a place I used to go to all the time. So what you see at the bottom is this tangled mass of commercial fishing rope and lobster traps and expired buoys hanging above. And when I recovered it, it was probably like the size of this room, and I had to just buy tools to cut it to take one section of it. It was pretty massive that just kind of rolled up into the shore. So I was thinking about these, well, you know, these lines and these traps and how they've lost function. They kind of lay limp. But I was thinking, I had this in my studio for so many years. I kept thinking, I didn't know what to do with it. It was already beautiful on its own. And I just kept thinking, what's there? What does it still hold? And then I just realized it's still holding the sea. You know, it's holding histories, it's holding memories, it's holding loss. Like what remains of this tangled, you know, rope is salt. So I cast a new rope by hand with salt, and the soap is, you know, the rope is tethered to the ceiling. I wanted to literally become part of the architecture. You know, thinking about salt's history, you know, and trade and currency, you know, was the practice of trading enslaved people in ancient Greece. I think about the sea journeys made by enslaved people throughout history. And the title came from a poem by this incredible poet, Kanisa Lubrin from St. Lucia, based in Canada. It has a new book out called Code Noir. But I'm just going to read an excerpt from this poem. How many ways can you disappear? A people, dignity by dignity, slant word by slant word, who turn grave by grave, by the curve and measure of graves after typhoons, cyclones, the mounting electro wastelands by the fresh water, and wrath of tumors as bright brush on the forehead, or covering over knees, the work of minutes grating against millions in flooded cities. How many ways can you empty a people, hope by hope? I do not venerate men at all. I have a problem with dream. And I usually end with that, but I'm going to show one last piece. And this sculpture is titled Stopgap. And I don't usually show it, but tomorrow's the anniversary of my best friend's death. She died a week into the COVID lockdown in March 2020. And it was literally the worst year of my life, personally. It was also the best year of my art career. And, you know, my dream gallery, I always said, if I ever have a gallery, it would be Tanya Bonakdar, but it'll never happen. Then they reach out, they're like, we want to represent you. So I had this amazing moment happen in my art career. And so the gallery's like, Karyn, you know, we're doing, you know, the virtual art Basel. We need you to make a work. And I'm like, I cannot make work. I'm paralyzed. Like I just retreated to poetry. That's what I did. And finally, like, it was the end of like mid-November, like, Karyn, we need the work in 2 weeks. I I was grateful in a way for their nudge, and I returned to this piece of driftwood that I brought back again from Martinez Island back in 2015. And I kept thinking about the gap that exists in it. You know, the gap was emblematic, literal, metaphoric to so much, like personally, but also, you know, to the complicated existence that we were all living through at that time. You know, I was thinking about the word gap, you know, the bodily form of the driftwood. I kept thinking about, kind of kept reading like a leg or like a foot. I kept referring to like the leg and the foot, you know, and the gap, you know, it's pretty obvious, you know, my use meaning like a break, a hole, you know, an unfilled space. I started referring to the gap as an unfulfilled space, you know, the gap. So I decided to fill the gap with all these strips of clothing, used clothing that were left over from the big brick wall piece. You know, and I was thinking of the challenges and the helplessness and the sadness that so many people are going through. It's like economic hardships, the pandemic, the fragile democracy, which now is even more fragile. I was thinking about how by the end of the year, you know, the dissipation of cries for racial justice pretty much quieted down. So, you know, the word stopgap, you know, this temporary solution, you know, to deal with an urgent problem or challenge. You know, so this was, you know, perhaps my metaphoric or feeble attempt at a solution, you know, kind of using what's at hand, readily available. You know, it's kind of a difficult piece to talk about conceptually, you know, because it's filled for me with so much heartache. But thanks for listening.